My name is Arnold Ware. I am 75 years old, and I live in a quiet, weather-beaten suburb just outside Sacramento, California, in the same house I built with my own 2 hands nearly half a century ago. It used to be my pride, this house. Cedar-paneled siding, a sunlit porch with a swing, a little garage I turned into a workshop after I retired from construction. My wife, Lorna, planted roses under the kitchen window. Yellow, her favorite. She said they reminded her of the California sunlight when we moved here from Montana in '72. She passed 8 years ago, and the roses are mostly dead now. Some mornings I still water the dirt, out of habit more than hope. The days have gotten very quiet. That's what they don't tell you about getting old. It's not just the aches or the pills or the way your body betrays you without warning. It's the silence. Not peaceful silence. That's something else. No, this is the kind that presses in on you like fog, muffling everything until even the sound of your own steps starts to feel like an intrusion. When Lorna died, I filled my days with little repairs, tightening bolts on the deck, repainting the back fence, recaulking bathroom tiles that didn't really need it. I wasn't fixing the house. I was trying to glue my life together with silicone and paint thinner. It didn't work, but it gave me something to do between dawn and dark. I have 2 sons. Thomas is the older one, 48 now, big-shot property manager, drives a Tesla, wears loafers without socks, always on the phone with someone more important than whoever he's with. Derek is 44. Teaches business at a community college, likes to talk about mindfulness and boundaries, as if those words ever put food on a table. They both live nearby, 15, 20 minutes tops, but I rarely see them unless something needs to be signed, funded, or fixed. They're not cruel, not in the way people think of cruelty. No screaming matches or slammed doors, just a slow and steady evaporation of presence, of warmth, of care. It's the kind of neglect that's hard to name, but easy to feel. Like walking into a room and realizing nobody noticed you left it. When they were little, they were always around me. Thomas used to help me hold the ladder when I cleaned the gutters. Derek would hand me nails, one by one, while I patched the shingles. I used to think I was building more than a house back then. I thought I was building a legacy. A place they'd return to. A center of gravity. But people grow. Or maybe they just drift. And sometimes you look up and realize the orbit you imagined was never real. It was just momentum. After Lorna passed, I tried to keep the tradition going. Family dinners on Sundays, 4th of July barbecues, Christmas lights the grandkids could help string. At first they came out of guilt, I think. Then less and less. Excuses piled up like unwashed dishes. Soccer games, business trips, deadlines, therapy appointments. I understood, or told myself I did. Everyone has a life. But deep down, I knew I'd become something else to them. A responsibility, an obligation, a shadow that lingered in their peripheral vision, too inconvenient to look at directly. Still, I held on. I kept their bedrooms the way they were, more or less. Clean sheets, working lamps, fresh towels in the closet. I paid their kids' school fees when the bills got tight. I helped Thomas with a down payment on his first duplex, lent Derek my truck for 6 months. Never once asked for anything back. That's what fathers do, right? They give. They step back. They wait to be needed again. Sometimes they wait forever. This house, though, it's the one thing I've never given up. Every floorboard tells a story. Lorna and I painted the master bedroom pale green the summer she beat breast cancer. The dent in the living room wall came from Thomas throwing a football indoors after I'd told him not to. The garage door still creaks the way it did when Derek accidentally drove into it in '96, coming back from his first date. All these flaws, these memories, they're mine. I earned them. I kept the taxes paid, the wiring updated, the plumbing clear. I did what I was supposed to do. I kept the house alive. I suppose I thought it would return the favor. That it would keep me safe, protected, rooted. But I've learned that even the things you build with love can be taken from you, especially by the ones you built them for. I started noticing little changes a few months ago. Thomas would stop by more often, usually unannounced. He'd walk through the rooms like a realtor, tapping on walls, peeking in closets, muttering things like, "Great square footage," and "just needs minor updating." Derek started dropping hints about downsizing and retirement communities with social programs. They both started bringing up my health more than usual. "Dad, what if something happens and no one's there?" "You should have a plan, Dad. It's not safe to live alone at your age." They always said it with smiles, with concern, like they were trying to sell me something sweet. But I know when I'm being softened up. I've been in construction. I know the smell of demolition before the hammer even hits. Still, I didn't think they'd actually do anything. Not really. Not until Thomas asked if he and his family could stay with me for a few weeks. Just until their roof was repaired after a supposed leak. I said yes. Of course I did. That's what fathers do. That's what I do. I said yes because I still believed that family meant something. Because I was lonely. Because I wanted to believe I still mattered. And for a little while, it almost felt like I did. The house was full of life again. Laughter, footsteps, the clatter of dishes, cartoons blaring in the morning. I told myself it was worth it. Even when I couldn't find space in my own kitchen. Even when they asked me to sleep in the guest room so the kids could have more consistent bedtime routines. I said yes. Always yes. Then the guest room became too close to the noise, and they moved me to the den. Then from the den to the garage. "Just for a night or two, Dad. We'll bring in a space heater. It's just until we figure things out." I slept next to my toolbox and a bag of old mulch. I told myself it was temporary. It wasn't. It started with a knock. Not a loud, urgent knock, but the kind that feels rehearsed, casual, almost apologetic. I opened the door to find Thomas standing there, wearing that same artificial smile he always put on when he had something to ask. Behind him was his wife, Meredith, looking uncomfortable in yoga pants and holding a plastic storage bin like a peace offering. I hadn't seen either of them in months, not since Christmas, when they stopped by for exactly 27 minutes, dropped off a generic sweater I never wore, and left before the pie had even been cut. "Hey, Dad," Thomas said, stepping over the threshold without waiting for an invitation. "Got a minute?" I stepped aside and let them in, already feeling the old familiar sensation creeping into my chest. The one that always came when my own home began to feel less mine. Meredith hovered in the entryway, like she was waiting to be told where to stand. Thomas didn't hesitate. He made himself at home on the couch, legs crossed like he'd done it 1,000 times this year, though it had probably been close to 12 months since he'd last sat there. He started with pleasantries. How was I feeling? Had I been taking my blood pressure meds? Was the furnace still making that noise? I nodded, answered politely, even smiled once. But I knew better than to think this visit was about me. Thomas didn't come unless something was wrong, or unless he wanted something. And sure enough, after Meredith had gone to the kitchen under the pretense of checking how much counter space you've got, he cleared his throat and leaned in like we were sharing a secret. "So listen, Dad. We've run into a bit of a situation with the house." I didn't say anything, just waited. "The roof," he continued. "It's leaking. Badly. And the contractor can't start for another 3 weeks, maybe longer. And with the twins and Meredith's mom visiting next month, we're kind of in a tight spot." I stared at him, trying to find the part where this affected me. Then he smiled again. "So we were thinking, we could stay here. Just temporarily. A couple of weeks, tops, just until the repairs are done. You've got the space. And honestly, it would give the kids a chance to spend some time with you. They miss you, Dad. That was the first lie. I hadn't seen the twins since they turned 12. They were 16 now. The last time they were here, they'd spent the entire visit on their phones, not saying more than a dozen words to me. But I nodded slowly. I didn't want to be difficult. I didn't want to say no and feel like the bad guy. Sure, I said. Of course. Whatever you need. The next day they moved in. Not just Thomas and Meredith and the twins, but boxes, bins, racks of clothing, 2 laptops, 3 gaming consoles, and a golden retriever named Pepper that I didn't even know they had. Within hours, my house was no longer my own. My reading chair had been relocated to make room for the dog's bed. My kitchen counter, once empty except for a coffee pot and toaster, was cluttered with protein powder tubs, meal prep containers, and Meredith's collection of herbal supplements. My den was suddenly Thomas's remote workstation, and the living room TV had been hijacked by the twins, who streamed loud, chaotic YouTube videos at full volume. I told myself it was fine. I reminded myself they were family, that it was temporary. I even smiled and cooked dinner that first night. Meredith thanked me, but quickly added that they'd be using their own ingredients from now on, something about Thomas's keto cycle and sodium sensitivity. On the 3rd day, Thomas approached me after dinner with a sheepish look. "Hey, Dad. Quick favor. The twins are having trouble sleeping. That back guest room, it's right next to the kitchen, and the fridge makes this weird noise. Meredith thought maybe they'd sleep better in your room, just for a little while." I opened my mouth to object, but he raised his hands, palms up. "Just a few days, I swear. You can use the den in the meantime. We'll even set up a cot." And like that, my bedroom was no longer mine. I tried to make the best of it. I moved some of my clothes into the hall closet and told myself that any father would do the same. The cot was uncomfortable, and the den smelled faintly of old paint and dog food, but I didn't complain. I even told them I liked the change of scenery. It felt like lying to a landlord just to keep the rent cheap. I tried to stay out of the way, to be invisible. I read in the garage, took long walks around the block, lingered at the grocery store longer than needed. But no matter how much space I gave, it was never enough. Meredith began complaining that I made too much noise in the mornings, that the microwave beep woke her up, that the smell of my coffee clashed with her essential oils. One night I came back from a walk and found the cot moved into the garage. "Just until the weekend," Thomas said. "We're rearranging some things inside. It'll be more peaceful for you out here. Plus, Pepper's been having trouble sleeping with all the foot traffic." So I slept in the garage. Among my tools, old paint cans, the mower I hadn't used in months, they gave me a blanket and a small heater and told me it would be cozy. I didn't argue. I didn't want to make waves. But something inside me began to turn. A feeling I hadn't allowed myself in a long time. Humiliation, not sadness, not disappointment. Humiliation. Like a child being punished. Like a tenant squatting in a house he'd spent his entire life paying for. The next morning, I woke up with a sore back and a stomach full of acid. The garage smelled of mildew and gasoline. My coffee pot had been unplugged. When I asked about it, Meredith said the outlet was needed for her blender. That afternoon, I overheard Thomas talking on the phone. He was pacing the backyard, voice low but distinct. "Yeah, it's got 3 bedrooms, hardwood floors, full kitchen, walkable neighborhood. We're running it at $295 a night on weekends, $210 weekdays. Fully furnished, even got garage space. Perfect for digital nomads." I froze. My blood went cold. He was talking about my house, not his, not some rental property. My house. I waited until he went back inside. Then I pulled out my phone and checked Airbnb. It took seconds. There it was, a listing titled Modern Suburban Escape. Photos of my home, my living room, my kitchen, even my bed, the one I hadn't slept in for weeks. Ah, hosts Thomas and Meredith Ware. They had listed my house for short-term rental, claiming it was their property. They were renting it out to strangers, while I slept in the garage like a forgotten piece of luggage. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I needed to understand how deep it went. I needed to know how long they had planned this, and how much they had taken. But in that moment, standing there with my hands shaking and my ears ringing, I realized the truth. I had been evicted from my own life, and I hadn't even seen it coming. The morning after I discovered the Airbnb listing, I sat in the garage for almost an hour, trying to make sense of what I had seen. My own home, rented out by my own son. There it was, online, perfectly lit, sanitized with filters, presented to strangers as some modern oasis, while I slept beside a shelf of motor oil and a rusted workbench. It wasn't the money, though that would come later. It was the deceit. The casual, practiced kind. The kind that assumes you're too slow to notice, too tired to fight. That's what hurt the most, that they thought I was already gone in all the ways that mattered. And the worst part? I hadn't even been asked, not consulted, not informed. My signature wasn't on anything. They had simply done it, like people who believed they were entitled. I kept quiet that day. I needed more information. I knew if I confronted them now, they would spin a web of reasons and half-lies. So I watched. I listened. That evening, a young couple arrived, early 30s, beaming, dragging 2 stylish roller suitcases behind them. Meredith greeted them at the door, all smiles and professional enthusiasm. "Welcome. Please make yourselves at home. The coffee is locally roasted. The streaming passwords are on the fridge." They didn't see me in the garage. Why would they? I wasn't part of the house anymore. I was an afterthought, a background object not worth mentioning. Meredith brought me a sandwich that night, wrapped in paper towel like a pity offering. "Hope you don't mind. We've got guests for the weekend. It's just easier this way." Easier for whom? I wanted to ask. But I didn't. I nodded like a polite ghost and waited for her to leave. For the next 3 days, I became a trespasser on my own property. I couldn't use the bathroom during the day because guests were always there. The upstairs shower, the one with the rail I had installed after my hip started giving me trouble, was off limits. I used the garden hose once, after making sure no one was watching, and even that made me feel like some decrepit man in a cautionary tale. The kitchen was entirely theirs now. I was allowed a shelf in the garage mini-fridge where I kept a carton of eggs, a jug of milk, and some instant noodles. The stove was forbidden. "Too much liability," Thomas had said. He didn't even look up from his phone when he said it. One night, unable to sleep on the stiff cot, I walked around the side of the house just to breathe in some air. Through the living room window, I saw the guests sitting on the same couch I had watched football on for decades, laughing, drinking wine. My framed photos had been replaced with abstract art prints. Even Lorna's yellow rose painting, the one we picked out on our honeymoon in Carmel, was missing. I stood there for a long time, not because I was spying, but because I needed to see with my own eyes just how thoroughly I had been erased. Monday morning, after the guests left, I decided I had to say something. I waited until breakfast, at least their version of it, all smoothies and gluten-free waffles. Thomas was at the counter scrolling through his tablet. "We need to talk," I said. He glanced at me, then back to his screen. "Sure, what's up?" I pointed toward the house. "The listing? The strangers? You're renting out my home without telling me, without permission." He didn't even flinch. "Dad, relax. It's temporary. Just a way to cover some costs while we get things sorted. You said we could stay here. Yes, I replied. I didn't say you could evict me from my own home. Meredith joined the conversation then, wearing a bathrobe and carrying a mug that said, "Gratitude is a mindset." We didn't evict you, she said, as if the word itself was melodramatic. We just repurposed the space. You said you wanted quiet. The garage gives you that. I stared at them both, stunned. You've put me out here like I'm an old lawnmower, I said, voice shaking. I live here. This is my house. Legally? Thomas asked, and that was the first time I saw the truth peek through the polished mask. Because, Dad, you transferred the house to us, remember? The paperwork? Last year? My heart dropped. I remembered signing some documents at Thomas's request. He said it was to help with refinancing, that the bank needed all residents on file. I hadn't read the fine print. I had trusted him. My son. You said it was for the loan. I muttered. It was. He replied. And now it's ours. But you're still welcome to stay, obviously. That word, welcome, hit like a slap. I was welcome to stay, in the garage, in what used to be mine. This is theft, I said quietly. Call it what you want. Thomas shrugged. But it's done, and we're not kicking you out. We just need to use the house to help pay off some debts. We're all in this together, Dad. No, we weren't. I went back to the garage and closed the door behind me, feeling the walls press inward. That day, the silence wasn't quiet. It roared. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in a folding chair, staring at the wooden beams above me, trying to piece together when exactly my life had slipped from my grasp. How many yeses did it take to erase a person? How many signatures does it take to dismantle a legacy? The next morning, Derek showed up. I hadn't seen him in over 6 months, not since he borrowed my ladder and never returned it. He looked uneasy, shifting from foot to foot, holding a grocery bag with apples and yogurt. Heard there's been some tension, he said, not meeting my eye. I thought I'd check on you. I nodded cautiously. Nice of you to remember I exist. He sighed. Come on, Dad. You know how busy things have been. Sure, I said, busy renting out my house. He winced. Tom told me everything. Look, I get it. It's weird. But maybe it's for the best. You don't need all this space. You're not using it. I looked at him. Really looked at him. This was the boy I had built tree houses with. The boy who cried when his goldfish died. Now he was telling me I didn't need my own home. So what do you suggest, Derek? I asked. That I sleep in the trunk next time? He laughed uncomfortably. No, but maybe. Maybe think about assisted living. Somewhere with people your age. Routine. Support. You'd still have your pension, and you wouldn't have to worry about any of this. Any of this? I asked. You mean being exploited by my own children? He stiffened. It's not like that. You've had a good life. It's time to think about what comes next. We're trying to help. Help. That word again, used like a club. I turned away, not trusting myself to speak. That night, I didn't eat. I sat alone, replaying their words. You're welcome to stay. It's not like that. We're all in this together. I thought about Lorna. What would she have said? She would have been furious. She had a sharp tongue when people crossed her boundaries. I missed her more than ever. She had been the shield. Without her, I was naked to their ambitions. Later that week, I overheard them discussing plans to rent the house for a corporate retreat. 5 days, 7 guests, a huge payout. We'll just put Dad in a motel, Thomas said. He'll like the break. Change of scenery. He's fragile, Meredith added. Just tell him it's a vacation. Book something cheap but clean. That was it. The moment. The final straw. I wasn't a father anymore. I wasn't even a person. I was an obstacle. A cost-benefit calculation they were eager to solve. And I knew then, if I didn't act, they would erase me completely. Not just from the house, but from the world. Quietly, efficiently, politely. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Not by a long shot. The day I decided to go into town, I did it not out of rebellion, but necessity. I needed batteries for the flashlight I kept by the cot in the garage, and frankly I needed to feel human again. Just the act of putting on a clean shirt, combing my hair, walking down the sidewalk like a man with a purpose, it grounded me, reminded me that I still existed outside their schemes. The corner store cashier, a young guy named Miles, who always called me Sir with a quiet respect, asked if I was doing okay. I told him I was just fine, but I wasn't. I wasn't even close. That afternoon I sat on a bench in the park near the library, trying to gather the pieces of my mind. And then I saw her, Mrs. Carver, my old neighbor from 2 streets over. Her hair was grayer now, her steps slower, but I remembered her warm banana bread and her laugh that could cut through any bad day. She spotted me and smiled, surprised. "Arnold, I thought you'd moved. I saw your house listed on Airbnb. I figured you finally went to live with your boys." My heart stopped. "Listed?" I said, though I knew what she meant. "Oh, yes," she said, sitting beside me. "A few weeks ago." It popped up when I was helping my niece look for a place to stay during her conference. I thought, hey, I know that porch. That's Arnold's house. Funny, though, the host name wasn't yours. Some woman, Meredith, I think. But the photos were definitely your house. Even your workshop in the garage was there. I remember you built those shelves yourself. I forced a smile and nodded, but inside I was unraveling. They hadn't just listed the house, they had listed my life. Without my name, without my story, like I was a ghost haunting the wallpaper. I left the park in a daze, my hands shaking. I didn't go straight home. I walked. For hours. Past the church Lorna and I used to attend. Past the hardware store where the clerk still remembered how I always bought real nails, not those flimsy plastic anchors. By the time I got back, the sun was low, and the house was glowing warm gold in the evening light. It looked like it belonged to someone else. When I opened the garage, there was a mattress on the floor now. Not a cot, not even an airbed. A thin, tired twin mattress shoved against the wall. Like I was the spare piece of furniture no one knew what to do with. I went inside, ignoring Thomas's voice calling from the kitchen, and walked straight to the study. It used to be mine once. There, on the desk, I found a stack of documents Meredith had been reviewing. I shouldn't have looked, but I did, because something inside me had already broken loose and wasn't going to be quiet anymore. I found emails from Airbnb support, payout notifications, guest reviews, but more than that, documents in my name, authorization forms, tax submissions, lease agreements. All of them bearing a shaky, distorted version of my signature. At least 3 of them dated within the past month. I hadn't signed a single one. My hand was steady, even at 75. These were fakes. And suddenly I understood. They were preparing something permanent. They weren't just renting my home. They were laying the groundwork to make it legally theirs. To argue eventually that I had transferred ownership voluntarily, that I was confused, that I didn't remember, and worst of all, that I couldn't take care of myself. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the garage with my documents spread on the workbench, checking everything. My Medicare records, my banking passwords, my mail, things I'd let slide, assuming the world would keep its shape around me. But the world had shifted, slowly and carefully, and I had stood still too long. Around 3 a.m, I heard voices outside. I pressed myself against the garage window, and saw Thomas and Derek talking near the fence. Derek had come by again, without speaking to me. I saw them passing a phone back and forth, whispering. At one point, Derek said something sharp, and Thomas waved him off. Then they laughed, as if whatever they were plotting was more entertainment than strategy. The next day, I waited until the house was empty. They'd gone out, supposedly to take the twins to some brunch spot in town. I called the county office from my phone and asked for a copy of the property title. It arrived by email 2 hours later. My name was nowhere on it. Meredith and Thomas Ware, listed as full legal owners. The house I had built, repaired, protected for nearly 50 years, had been stolen in plain sight, and I had handed it over like a fool, thinking I was helping my son through a refinance. I felt the blood drain from my face. My mouth went dry. I was a guest now, a guest without rights, without power, without even a key to his own door. But it didn't end there. That evening, Meredith handed me an envelope. "We've booked you a place," she said, as if it were a gift. "For next weekend. Just a little break. Get away from the chaos. You'll love it. It's in Reading. Nice little motel. They have a continental breakfast." I opened the envelope and stared at the reservation receipt. 3 nights. Paid in full. Room 104. She smiled sweetly, then added, "Oh, and don't worry. We'll watch the house while you're gone." I nodded slowly. My throat was tight. "Just out of curiosity," I asked, "what dates are those?" She answered cheerfully, "Friday through Sunday. The house is booked for a team-building retreat. Some startup guys. They paid extra for extended checkout. It'll help with the mortgage." I didn't ask whose mortgage. I already knew. That night, I called the only person I trusted outside of blood. Wes Hartley, an old friend from my construction days, now a semi-retired notary and one of the smartest people I knew. He'd helped me with paperwork after Lorna died. I told him I needed to meet. He didn't ask questions. "Tomorrow morning," he said. "Bring everything." And that was when the tide turned. Not all at once, not with a bang, but with a quiet, stubborn resolve that said, "This ends now." I was going to take it back, everything. And this time, I wouldn't ask. The next morning, I showed up at Wes Hartley's office carrying a battered folder filled with every document I'd managed to collect over the past week. I hadn't slept again. I didn't care. I was running on something different now, not adrenaline, not rage exactly, but a kind of urgent clarity that only comes when you realize the floor beneath you is rotten and you've only just now started falling. Wes, now in his late 60s, still had the same bark of a laugh and the same habit of stirring his coffee with a pen cap. When I entered his cluttered office, he gave me a long look, concern mixed with a kind of wary admiration. "Jesus, Arnold," he said. "You look like you've crawled out of a mine shaft." I sat down, handed him the folder, and said, "Start with the fake signatures." He didn't speak for several minutes, just read, flipping pages slowly, nodding, occasionally muttering, "Uh-huh," or "unbelievable." When he finally looked up, his voice was low and sober. "They've railroaded you, Arnie. I don't say that lightly. This isn't just some technicality. This is fraud, intentional, calculated, and it won't hold up under scrutiny." I swallowed hard, relief and dread colliding in my chest. "So what do I do?" He rubbed his chin, then reached for a legal pad. "First, we file a formal complaint of elder financial abuse. That's step 1. Then we get you a forensic signature analyst. We'll need to prove those documents weren't signed by you, clean, admissible, court-worthy. I'll handle that. But more importantly, we have to act fast. If they're smart, they'll try to cover their tracks. Liquidate, refinance, move assets. You need to move out, immediately." I blinked. "Move out?" You're in danger, Arnold, not just of losing your house. You're in danger of being declared mentally incompetent. I sat there, numb, while he laid it all out. It was worse than I thought. Thomas and Meredith hadn't just listed the house, they'd quietly been taking over my accounts. A joint checking account had been reopened, using a form I had never seen. My mail was being rerouted. They had even filled out a DMV change of address form, on my behalf, listing their home as my new residence. It was a slow erasure, a paper trail designed to make it look like I had willingly stepped aside. I hadn't. I wouldn't. Wes got on the phone with a social worker he knew from a prior elder abuse case. Within 48 hours, she had initiated a report. Then we went to the bank, where I met with a manager named Colleen, who looked stunned as I told her what had happened. They tried to add Meredith to your retirement account last week, she said, scrolling through her computer. She claimed you were having trouble managing things, wanted to streamline the withdrawals. I nearly laughed. She wanted to streamline my life out of existence. With Wes's help, I revoked all power of attorney rights, closed the compromised accounts, opened a new one under a fresh mailing address, and placed identity fraud alerts with all 3 credit bureaus. I contacted my pension fund, froze access, and set up voice verification protocols. Each phone call, each form, each conversation felt like patching a hull that had already taken on gallons of water. But I kept going. I had to. I returned to the house that evening like a soldier crossing enemy lines. I didn't say a word to Thomas or Meredith. I just nodded, smiled faintly, pretended I hadn't spent the day reclaiming pieces of myself they had tried to take. They thought I was tired. They thought I was fading. That was their first mistake. The next morning, I met with a real estate lawyer who confirmed what Wes had already told me. My signature had been forged, and the notarization was invalid. The transaction was legally brittle. With the right moves, I could unwind it. But be careful, she warned. They'll come at you sideways. They'll call you confused, unstable. They'll say you're bitter, that you're old and paranoid. The law's on your side, but optics are everything. Stay steady. I stayed more than steady. I became methodical. I began recording conversations. I logged every interaction. When Derek stopped by again, pretending to check on me, I asked him to clarify, casually, whether he'd ever seen me sign over the house. He hesitated just long enough. Well, I mean, Tom said you wanted to help with the loan. I just assumed... You assumed wrong, I said. You assumed I wouldn't notice. Later that week, a second group of Airbnb guests arrived. This time, it wasn't a couple, but 6 young adults, rowdy, drunk by 7 p.m., setting up portable speakers in the backyard and blasting music that made the windows vibrate. Meredith apologized profusely. We'll tell them to keep it down. It's just this weekend. Big payout. I said nothing, just walked back to the garage and turned on my voice recorder. The next morning, I filed a restraining order against Thomas and Meredith on the basis of elder abuse and unlawful eviction. I submitted it alongside the documents Wes had compiled. It wasn't about anger. It was about power. They had taken mine. Now I was taking it back. But I wasn't done. I contacted a forensic handwriting expert who reviewed the lease agreements and signature cards. Within a week, she had produced a formal report. 3 signatures were highly inconsistent with my baseline samples. 2 others showed probable simulation. In plain terms, they were fake. I submitted the report to Wes and forwarded a copy to the County Fraud Division. The final blow came from a place I hadn't expected. The Department of Building and Safety. Wes had a contact there who looked into the Airbnb listing. Turns out the property wasn't zoned for short-term rental. Thomas and Meredith had violated county ordinances, forged my authorization for the rental permit, and received multiple noise complaints in just the last 30 days. Fines were already pending. Wes smiled when he told me. They've hoisted themselves with their own damn greed. On the day the social worker arrived to conduct her evaluation, I was ready. She was young, calm, and professional. We talked for over an hour in the garage. I told her everything. My memory was clear, my reasoning sound. She took notes, asked questions, nodded. They'll likely try to discredit you, she said softly. They always do, but you're not alone, and you're not powerless. I thanked her, and for the first time in weeks I believed it. 2 days later, Thomas knocked on the garage door, face red, fists clenched. "What the hell is going on?" he barked. "You're trying to sabotage us?" I stood up slowly. "No, Thomas," I said. "I'm not sabotaging anything. I'm defending what's mine." He laughed bitterly. "You're being ridiculous. You're old. You're confused. I'm lucid." I cut him off. "And I'm done being quiet." Meredith appeared behind him. "You think anyone will believe you? An old man living in a garage?" I stepped forward. "They already do. You should check your inbox." That evening, they received a cease and desist letter from my attorney. Airbnb suspended their listing. County enforcement issued a formal citation. And the bank? They froze all accounts pending investigation. Thomas and Meredith's empire, built on entitlement and assumption, had begun to collapse. But the most satisfying moment came a few days later, when I received a letter from the district attorney's office. They were opening an inquiry into elder exploitation and property fraud. I folded it carefully, placed it beside Lorna's wedding photo on the workbench, and sat down. Outside, the evening sun cast long golden shadows across the yard, the same yard I'd mowed every Sunday for 4 decades. And for the first time in years, I felt the house start to come back to me. Not fully, not yet, but soon. I knew the day would come when they'd push back, but I didn't expect it to be so theatrical. It was a Friday afternoon when Thomas and Meredith came barreling into the garage like they owned not just the house, but the very right to the air I breathed. Their faces were flushed, not with shame, but with the frantic desperation of people who suddenly realized the game they thought they were winning was already lost. Thomas slammed a folder onto the workbench beside me, knocking over my coffee. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, voice strained, nearly shaking. I looked down at the papers he had shoved forward, copies of the DA's inquiry notice, the suspension from Airbnb, the citation from the county zoning board. "It's justice," I said calmly, though my pulse was hammering in my ears. "It's what happens when you think you can steal from someone and smile while you do it." Meredith stepped in closer, her voice shrill and trembling. "You think we don't know what you're doing? Talking to lawyers, social workers? You're trying to ruin our lives, Arnold. Your own son's life." I looked at her, at the veins standing out in her neck, at the rage curling her mouth into a sneer, and I realized I didn't recognize her anymore. Not even as a daughter-in-law, not as anything. "I'm reclaiming mine," I answered, and for once I didn't raise my voice or apologize for the firmness in it. "You took everything, my home, my space, my name, my dignity, and you sold it by the night to strangers. You lied, you forged, and you treated me like a piece of furniture in a house you never built. Now you're angry because I didn't just vanish like you planned." Thomas threw his hands up, pacing like a caged animal. "This is insane. You're overreacting. None of this had to happen if you just let us help." The word hit me again like a slap. Help. That poisoned, smiling word they always used when they meant control. "I don't need your help," I said. "I needed your respect. You couldn't give it, so now you'll give me something else. Space." "You're senile," Meredith snapped. "You're not thinking straight. We have doctors who can confirm—" I stepped forward, just enough to make her stop mid-sentence. "I've already undergone evaluations, independent ones, from people with no stake in your lies. I am of sound mind, and every move I've made is legally protected. If you try to push further, you will not only lose this house, you will face criminal charges." Her mouth opened, then closed. Behind her, Thomas rubbed his eyes with both hands, and finally said, in a quieter voice, "So what happens now?" I didn't answer right away. I turned to the workbench, opened my own folder, and handed him a copy of the formal notice of eviction. "You have 30 days to vacate the property. That's per court order. I will not appeal. I will not discuss it. You violated every boundary I had left, and now I am drawing the only line that matters. You're done here." They didn't scream after that. They stood in stunned silence, as if they had just walked into the final scene of a play they thought they were directing. I saw the realization dawn, especially in Thomas. This wasn't a bluff, and I wasn't an old man clinging to dusty pride. I had outmaneuvered them. I had gathered evidence, marshaled allies, documented everything. I had beaten them at their own game. They left without another word, and that night the garage felt less like a cage and more like a war room where a final battle had been won. But the climax didn't end there. The next day I received a letter from the joint family attorney. Apparently Thomas and Meredith were contesting the reversal of ownership. They were claiming coercion, undue influence, even dementia. Their lawyer attached a bundle of falsified doctor's notes, some I had never seen before, claiming I had been in cognitive decline for years. I brought the letter straight to Wes. He barely glanced at it before shaking his head and saying, "This is desperation. They're out of moves and grabbing at shadows." Still, we acted. We scheduled another cognitive evaluation immediately, this time with a forensic psychiatrist. The test lasted almost 4 hours. Memory, reasoning, emotional stability, comprehension, problem-solving. It was more grueling than any physical labor I'd done in the last 10 years, but I passed, not just sufficiently, but with notes from the doctor affirming clarity, emotional resilience, and independence. The report was added to the case file. The legal foundation they were building collapsed under its own falsity. A week later, I came home from a meeting with Wes to find the front yard strewn with trash. Shredded documents, torn photographs, food wrappers. My mailbox had been smashed in. The windows of the garage bore greasy handprints. I didn't call the police. I simply took photographs, logged everything, uploaded the images to a shared file with Wes and the DA's office. These weren't tantrums. They were admissions of guilt. And I wouldn't be baited. The final confrontation came not with shouting or chaos, but silence. 2 weeks before their court-mandated move-out date, Thomas returned alone. He stood at the garage door, hat in hand like a child caught cheating at school. "I just want to talk," he said. I opened the door, said nothing, and let him step in. He looked around at the sparse setup, the cot, the workbench, the single lamp, and his eyes watered. "I didn't think it would get this far," he said. "We were just trying to get ahead. We thought—" "You thought wrong," I said. "You thought I'd roll over and vanish. You thought I was too old, too tired, too soft to fight. You forgot who built this house, who raised you, who taught you to use your damn hands in the first place." He sat down on a crate and stared at the floor. "I don't even know who I am anymore," he whispered. "Meredith, she got carried away, and I let it happen." I nodded, but I didn't offer sympathy. It was too late for that. "I'm not here for apologies," I said. "I'm here to live the rest of my life in peace. You made choices. Now you live with them." He looked up. "And that's it? You cut us out?" "I'm not cutting you out," I said. "You walked out years ago. You just didn't notice. This house, this name, this history. You gave them up when you decided to rent my bedroom to strangers. There's no path back from that." He didn't argue. He just stood up, nodded, and left. When the garage door closed behind him, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for months. Not from fear. From waiting, for justice, for the wheel to turn. It had turned, and for the first time since Lorna passed, I felt something deep and unexpected in my chest. Relief, not triumph, not vengeance, freedom. The morning after they left, I stepped into the house like a man returning to a memory he wasn't sure was still real. The silence inside wasn't hostile anymore. It was clean, open, full of space that belonged to me again. My old chair was still missing, replaced months ago by one of those boxy beige things Meredith thought looked minimalist. But the floor still creaked the same way, and the sun still spilled through the kitchen window in that familiar golden streak Lorna used to call God's light. I stood there for a while, letting it all settle. The furniture could be replaced. The damage could be fixed. The betrayal would take longer. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was trespassing in my own skin. I was home. Not the physical structure, but the sense of dignity that had been buried under layers of deceit and manipulation. I moved through each room slowly, noting what was gone, what had been moved, what had been carelessly discarded. In the guest room closet, I found an old box with my name scratched on it in Thomas's handwriting. Inside were bank statements, my old military discharge papers, and a stack of unopened birthday cards I had sent to my grandchildren over the years. None of them had been opened. Some were still sealed. That's when the last trace of bitterness finally burned off, like the final ember dying in a fireplace. Not out of peace, but because I knew the truth now. You can love someone and still walk away from them. You can forgive someone and still never speak to them again. I boxed the papers and put them in the attic. Over the following weeks, I rebuilt, not just the house, but the life I had nearly surrendered. I replaced locks, painted walls, donated their designer furniture to a shelter. I cleared the fake plants from the bathroom and planted real ones on the windowsill. I cancelled all streaming services and reinstalled my old antenna. The twins had set up motion-sensing lights all over the backyard. I tore them down and hung wind chimes in their place. I brought Lorna's yellow rose painting down from the garage and returned it to the hallway, where it belonged. The house breathed again, not the busy, chaotic breath of guests and ambition, but the steady, quiet breath of a man who has taken back his name. Legally, the process dragged for months, but I didn't flinch. The DA's office confirmed their investigation was moving forward. I didn't press for jail time. I didn't want spectacle. I wanted silence. I wanted peace. I sold the house 6 months later. Not out of defeat, but because I was ready. Ready to be somewhere they had never been, where their footprints didn't stain the ground. I bought a small river cottage up north, a 2-bedroom place with a porch that faces the water, and an old fireplace that smokes unless you open the flue just right. The locals call me Mr. Ware. They don't know about Thomas or Meredith or the garage or the forged signatures. They know I fix my own shutters and bring fresh cornbread to Sunday potlucks. That's enough. I never heard from them again. Not directly. Once, months after the move, I got a voicemail from Derek. Something meandering about wanting to reconnect and time-healing things. I deleted it. Not out of cruelty, but because I had nothing left to give him. That part of me had been stolen, and what I reclaimed I wasn't going to spend on hollow apologies. I rewrote my will. Everything I owned, house, accounts, belongings, now goes to a non-profit that provides legal aid to elderly people fighting coercion, eviction, and financial fraud. I visit the office sometimes, anonymously, and drop off coffee or donuts for the staff. They don't know who I am. and they don't need to. I've given them what matters. Some nights I sit on my porch and listen to the river pass. It doesn't roar or rush. It murmurs, steady and indifferent. That's the lesson I carry now. Life moves with or without your permission. But every so often it offers a fork in the current, a chance to stand up, to turn, to row. I took that chance. I stood when I was supposed to fade. I rowed, and I made it home.